Hello. Astute listeners will be able to tell that I'm not Amy Lewin. Instead, it's your new host, John Thornhill. I'll be taking over these interview podcasts while Amy's on maternity leave. And as you'd expect from Amy, she delivered to deadline and is the proud mother of a very cute boy called Wilbur. If you don't know me, I'm the co-founder of Sifted, the media organization which covers European tech and makes this podcast. I also write a weekly column for both Sifted and the Financial Times, where I'm innovation editor. So on with the pod. Joining me today is James Wise, partner at Storid VC Balderton and chair of the Sovereign AI Unit, a new £500 million initiative launched by the UK government. As its name suggests, the Sovereign AI's aim is to anchor promising AI companies to this country. The unit was announced last year as part of the AI Opportunities Action Plan, authored by Entrepreneur First's Matt Clifford in his role as AI advisor to the Prime Minister. It has recently backed former DeepMind scientist David Silver's AI lab Ineffable Intelligence in a record-breaking $1.1 billion seed round, which valued the startup at $5.1 billion. And James started his career in venture 15 years ago when he helped launch one of the UK's largest social venture funds, the Social Business Trust. Since joining Balderton in 2012, he has led investments in second-hand shopping platform Depop, AI agent maker Convergence, bank payment fintech GoCardless, and AI frontier labs, Prior Labs, which was acquired by German software titan SAP at the beginning of this month. James, great to have you on the pod.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's start with the news. I'd love to hear about Prior. What does Prior do, and what do you think of this deal?
Yeah, so Prior Labs build tabular foundation models, and many listeners, I'm sure, are aware of LLMs, large language models, which are great at generating responses to questions based in language. Tabular foundation models take a similar technique, but apply it to big data sets. So think about spreadsheets, databases, structured data. If you've used a large language model to ask it a question to do basic maths on some of these data sets, it's not particularly good. They're not really specialized for that kind of use case. So tabular foundation models, and Prior Labs build the best ones in the world, allow you to do things like statistical analysis, regression, predictions on this structured data, but in a one-shot way, in a very quick way, and in a way which means that an individual like myself, who doesn't have huge background in machine learning, can do in seconds what used to take weeks of work for a trained data scientist.
And this is a very quick deal from formation of the company to acquisition. I mean, it only raised a €9 million funding round in February 2025, I believe. Why did it all happen so fast?
Yeah, well, the company was formed in February. We were the first and only investors from the venture side, so I was the only board member in the history of the company. But it was, we invested, and the reason why it's so successful is because it was based on the work of Professor Frank Hutter, who'd been working in this field for decades. So he invented a lot of the methods used traditionally in what's called AutoML. He was well known globally. And so obviously, because of his expertise in the space and because of the team he built, they were very quickly able to ship the best models in the world. And so they led on all the benchmarks. And because of that, we're also very quickly able to build a great community of developers around them and get a lot of commercial interest. So 18 months is a very quick turnaround from seed round to billion euro M&A. But they've executed very fast, and they did 10 years worth of work in that time.
Uh-huh. Can you share any more about the terms and how much the exit was?
So we can't share a lot right now. This is obviously going through a regulatory process. So we expect that to complete in a couple of months. But as SAP made public, this is over €1 billion they'll be investing in this company, and a vast majority of that is going to the acquisition.
Right. Okay. I believe that you met the co-founders before the company even existed. Is that common?
It's increasingly common. We're moving to a world where the people with deep expertise in AI, whether that's we had the same experience at Convergence, by the way, and there's this experience at Prior Labs, but they're incredibly rare, people at the frontier, but incredibly important in pushing this technology forward. A lot of them come from research. A lot of them have been either in academia, in their own institutions, or in some of the other frontier labs, whether that's DeepMind, which is famous for its research, OpenAI, or Anthropic. Because they're so steeped in research, they can build these products very quickly. And so they're able to raise money literally before they start a company because they know what they're going to do. We're moving from a world where in lots of areas, the startup ecosystem was around fast iteration and learning. And so, very quickly still, but over time, you built a product, you learn what worked, and you scaled it to a world where you can ship a product very quickly and scale it much quicker. And so increasingly, we are seeing these deals, which are basically formation investments in the company at formation.
And a lot of these companies are selling out really quite quickly. We've had a whole string of very promising AI companies being sold. We've had Silo AI in Finland, Sana Labs in Sweden, Faculty in the UK, and now Prior Labs in Germany. And when Eric Schmidt spoke at the Sifted Summit last year, he urged European founders to be more ambitious, not to sell out for $1 billion, but aim for a 10 billion, 100 billion. Is that not possible in Europe?
Well, I think it certainly is. And, you listed some fantastic companies there, but I'd counter with Wave, which is raising over $1 billion this year, has raised $1 billion this year. Ineffable Intelligence that you just mentioned raised $1 billion this year. 11 Labs, I think, will raise roughly that amount this year. So I think there's plenty of examples of frontier labs in Europe who are scaling rapidly. The difficult decision for founders in AI is to compete often. If you're building a model, you need access to a huge amount of compute and a huge amount of distribution. And some founders will say, well, for me to complete this mission, for me to transform the industry with my particular type of AI, in Prior Labs' case, tabular data, tabular foundation models, it makes sense to partner early with a company of the scale of SAP. And certainly at Balderton, we saw that with Convergence, which joined with Salesforce, and Prior Labs, which will join with SAP. But it's not the only experience of scaling AI in Europe.
Let's move on to the Sovereign AI unit. Why did you get involved?
Well, first of all, I think, as many listeners will share, I feel passionately that this moment, this technological moment we're in AI, is going to be transformational. It's going to be transformational. It's obviously transformational to the work we do at Balderton, but far more importantly, it's going to be transformational for the economic and national well-being of us all across the world, but specifically those of us in Britain. And so being able to be part of that in any way where I could use the skills I have, which is setting up venture funds and doing early stage investments, I was keen to participate in. On top of that, this government, building on the work of the prior government, have made it clear that AI is a priority. So, lots of people go into government work for different reasons, but this really felt like an area where the government wanted to be successful. They really cared about it as well. Certainly the minister I've been working with closely for AI, and also the Secretary of State and Liz Kendall feel that way. And so I saw this opportunity to both use my skills to be helpful, but also in a way where it felt like the government was really behind it.
And how did it work? Who approached you from the government?
So I have done some government advisory work with previous governments, and I specifically was on something called the Industrial Development Advisory Board, which is a rather grand title, but to oversee large amounts of taxpayer funding into different industries. And often it's to grill the people suggesting that and pull back some of the taxpayer funding. And to be honest with you, I was complaining about some of the government processes and how we dealt with the private industry when we came to funding. And the Minister for AI, Kanishka, was kind enough to listen to my complaints and say, well, why don't you do something about it?
I will teach you for complaining.
Yeah.
And now on paper, you only work 5 hours a week, I believe, as chair of the unit. Is that really the case? And how do you spend that time?
Well, I don't think we can measure the hours, but it's a lot more than 5. My role over the last 4 or 5 months since I've been chair has been really to set it up. And that means establishing a legal entity. It means establishing the processes. It means hiring a team. And it means setting a lot of precedent, because what we're doing is pretty unique within central government, at least. And of course, on top of all of that, reaching out to founders and sort of helping with that part of the job. That's taken up a lot of time over the last 4 or 5 months. The good news is we now have a great team in place. We now have our processes set up. And so I can step back and be one of the more traditional chair types who turns up a couple of hours a month and provides some hand-wavy direction.
I guess one of the questions about the fund would be its relatively small size. Do you think that you can move the dial with £500 million? I was in Silicon Valley recently, and just OpenAI and Anthropic between them have raised $150 billion this year. How ambitious can you be?
Yeah, and look, in the UK alone, we've had over $8 billion, I think, £6 billion and change invested in the last quarter, right? So we recognise that £500 million is an entry ticket to this market. It's not nothing, and I have to reiterate that. I spent a lot of time with founders up and down the country talking about sovereign AI, and a £5 million check is transformative. So I don't want to be too cute about it. We recognise it's an entry point. It's an entry point both to other parts of government, which can provide more capital, British Business Bank, National Wealth Fund, and others. But more importantly, it's an entry point to many areas of support the government can provide, which go well beyond cash. And if you are one of those breakout labs, as we heard about the Ineffable Intelligence round you mentioned already, you may not worry about raising capital, but you do worry about access to compute. You do worry about making sure that you are accessing data which is relevant to the kind of models you need. You do want support around building talent both here and internationally. You may want support selling to government, right, through traditional procurement processes. All those things are worth a lot more than the £500 million we'll be investing. And we hope this is just the starting point of what we're able to.
You mentioned Ineffable. Tell us about it. Why did you back David Silver?
Well, David Silver is one of the most important researchers and practitioners of AI in the last decade. He's a professor at UCL, but he worked at DeepMind very closely with Sedemis on their multi-agent work, on AlphaGo, which is one of their big breakthroughs, and to a lesser extent on AlphaFold. His approach, though, to AI is fundamentally different to what we've seen work so far with OpenAI, Anthropic, and others. So rather than building large language models on huge amounts of human-generated data, they're taking a different approach at Ineffable. They're basically training agents through experience. And if that's right, if that works, not only will it mean that the AI models that we all use get better, which is great, and we are able to hopefully access even cheaper models, but also it means that we're going to have a very, very competitive frontier lab here in the UK. Now, it may not work. The risks we're taking at Sovereign AI are the same risks an early stage venture capitalist takes. We expect failure in lots of the cases. But if it does work, the upside here for Britain and for all of us is so immense. And David Silver is so unique in his capabilities, we felt it was one of the right bets to make, as it were.
It's quite striking in Europe how labs are making different types of bets. I mean, Silicon Valley is very much kind of LLM pilled, isn't it? It's all in on scaling these large language models. Europe, there are several companies now. AMI Labs, run by Yann LeCun in France, Ineffable here. We've had Recursive setting up in Europe as well, and Unlikely as well. Is that a real opportunity for Europe, do you think, to explore these different avenues to getting to AGI?
Yeah, I would list a lot of other unique types of model architecture and unique types of models in different areas. It is an opportunity. I think that the large language model companies, and obviously you've got to include DeepMind in that conversation, are building phenomenal products, right? And they're all transforming the way that we do our work. However, they are now in a race. They're in a race for capabilities. We know what the scaling curve looks like around capabilities. It means huge amounts of data, huge amounts of compute, a lot of energy, and they're so focused on winning that race. I think it means that they can often overlook some of the other areas of innovation that are happening in AI. And whether that's something, a breakthrough in life sciences, whether it's a breakthrough in robotics, or it's a fundamentally different architecture, there is now opportunity to compete in that space. And Europe it's more than its fair share of brilliant researchers and is increasingly able to access capital to take advantage of some of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, tell us about the second investment you made on Callosum.
So Callosum is a team which Cambridge students went through ARIA, went through Entrepreneur First, so have got great experience with the frontier early stage investors in the UK and beyond. And they're building a software platform to allow you to access heterogeneous compute. So that means that you don't have to be completely reliant on one compute stack. Let's say it's just TPU at Google, or it's just NVIDIA's GPU in other clouds. It allows you to balance different usage across chips. If we're in a world where actually it gets quite difficult to access compute, a compute crunch, which a lot of people think we're already in, it might get worse, then you do need a solution where you can access different types of chips at different types of speeds, different types of times, and Callosum will enable that.
And you mentioned there ARIA. You've also kind of co-invested with the British Business Bank as well. Is that kind of really the kind of nexus of new capability in Britain? There's kind of three organizations that you just talked.
Well, certainly. And look, we do different things, right? ARIA is really focused on grant making, on really early stage research. Sovereign AI is about accelerating early stage successes. So we're not here to do market failure. We're here to focus on successes. But we're doing that in a commercial way. So we're on the cap table. We're hoping to get taxpayer returns. And you're right, British Business Bank, they have a much broader mandate. They're going to do much broader investing than just AI and have done historically. But they can scale in terms of the capital they deploy to hundreds of millions of pounds in single checks. So we work very closely with those two organizations.
Now, The unit's venture team is led by Josephine Kant, an investor with experience at Google and YC. And she told Sifted not so long ago that when she consulted people about taking the job, they told her that she would be absolutely crazy to take the position. Have you been surprised by the caliber of the people attracted to the government and prepared to make these crazy decisions?
Yeah, and Josephine is a great example of that. She's someone who has spent her career at Y Combinator, at Google, setting up a seed stage venture fund in the US, and gave up that highly lucrative, potentially, career to go and work in government, where obviously she's taken a salary cut and she has taken on all of the wonderful restrictions that you get working in the public sector. So, and we've advertised for investment partners, for a managing partner, and for lots of different roles within the Sovereign AI Fund. And it's astonishing the quality of people who are willing to give up their time and effort to come and be part of this. And one of the reasons why that's been possible is because the government have allowed us to set up a fully independent investment committee inside of government. It's a really hard thing for them to do. It's a very hard thing for us to have achieved, to be honest with you. There's been a lot of negotiation about how that works. But because we've been able to give people that freedom, I think people feel it is something which is going to make a difference. It's not just a government announcement, a splash on the front pages that never goes anywhere. So hopefully we've got that right. Hopefully we give people the right independence, and as a result, we've attracted. Brilliant.
And how do you address the potential conflict of interest issue between what you're doing at the Sovereign AI unit in Balderton?
Yeah, and obviously this is a huge part of my onboarding and all of my investments that I've done both at Balderton but also personally are all public. But I'm not involved in any particular investment decision within the Sovereign AI unit. So I don't sit on the investment committee. I don't involve myself in any of those decisions. I'm there to set the strategy, to set the direction, to hire the people, and therefore there isn't a direct conflict of interest. But I recognise that there could be a perceived one, and so we've tried to be as transparent about everything as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now there have been several entrepreneurs and investors who have gone into the government. Kanishka Narayan, who's a former VC, is now the UK's AI minister. We had Matt Clifford from Entrepreneurs First being the PM's AI advisor for a while. Alex DePledge, founder of Ressi, who became the Chancellor's entrepreneurship advisor. How valuable is it to inject this kind of private sector experience into government?
Well, look, it's been really welcomed. I think it's a great sign. And, as you mentioned, it's been across governments. The Conservative government previously brought in Matt, and he was kept on. They also brought in Ian Hogarth, who helped set up AC. And you mentioned Alex, who's joined more recently to work with the Chancellor. And, in my few months of doing this job now, the experience is really appreciated. I think that the civil service get a lot of criticism. That's part of the role, right? Transparency and accountability from the press and from the public is necessary. But I think there's a recognition that certainly when it comes to frontier technologies and venture, which is a relatively new asset class when it comes to the grand scale of things, and a relatively small one still, but a growing one, the government doesn't necessarily have that talent and capability internally. And so they're building it, but they're building it alongside people they perceive to be experts in the space. So far, I think it's worked fairly well. I think AC has been a great success. I think Alex's work on reforming some of the regulations around what we're building here in the UK and what can be built here in the UK has been really positive. And I think the AI action plan had a lot of really positive points as well from Matt. So overall, there's some good momentum. But ultimately, the government can't just be reliant on bringing in external talent. It needs to build these capabilities internally as well. And I hope at Sovereign AI, we contribute to some of that.
Mm-hmm. Does it surprise you that this government is not shouting more loudly about the success of tech? I mean, as you were talking earlier, some astonishing companies being formed in Britain and Europe more generally. There's a lot of money now going into this sector. It's a great news story for Britain. Why is the government not shouting this from the rafters?
Well, I think, anyone who follows me on LinkedIn will feel that I'm certainly shouting it from the rafters, and that, to the Secretary of State's credit, she gave a great speech about AI at RUSI last week. She was, integral to us getting coverage of our launch. And so I think lots of people in the government are talking positively about AI. The Chancellor was very supportive of our launch as well. The Prime Minister's talked about AI a number of times, hosted a lot about it. However, there's lots of challenges facing the UK at the moment. And I think sometimes it's hard for the government to get a hearing on some of the positive stuff. I think it's a great shame because we are in a moment where Britain should be proud and excited about what it's got when it comes to AI. I don't think we've done a good enough job of explaining it to the public. And I worry that political opportunists will see that. And as we're seeing in the US to some degree now, there will be a movement to say, well, what does this do for Britain? Let's talk it down. Let's try and stop it. And there may be votes in that for some people. And so you're right to say, well, I actually think the government's trying. We need to do a much better job of getting this positive message across.
Could you ever see yourself quitting the venture industry and going into politics full time?
I'm doing enough work at the moment in government to know that I'm probably focused on the day job for now.
Now, one of the functions of the unit is not only writing checks of up to kind of £10 million or so for AI startups, but perhaps more importantly, offering portfolio companies access to the government. What does that actually mean?
Well, it's a very broad offer, but to try and make that feel more concrete. So, very specifically, we're putting out calls around procurement. So we put out a call around strategic development of automated labs. We've put out a call around strategic development of new data sets. OpenBind, which is a data set around protein and enzyme binding, is being developed, and that's public. And we're putting out more calls like that to say, okay, the UK government has access to compute through places like Isomorphic, which is a known supercomputer out in Bristol. It has access to huge data sets, which are really valuable to making AI better, which the civil service want to use. They want to use this AI, so they need to train it on the right data sets. And it also has a lot of institutional knowledge, and it buys a lot of stuff. Right, hundreds of billions of pounds go through the procurement processes every year in the UK. And so what the Sovereign AI is doing is working with entrepreneurs to help navigate those opportunities. I think historically, in particular around procurement, multiple different types of government have failed to reform the processes such that small businesses, insurgent technologies can be adopted in everything from defense through to your local councils. Mm-hmm. And so part of our job at Sovereign AI is to help entrepreneurs navigate that.
And do you think the government can be doing a lot more of procurement? I saw a chart the other day that the top 9 of the top 10 government AI contracts have been awarded to American companies.
Yeah, and look, that probably reflects the fact that we need more AI companies here in the UK to compete with them and build better products. And that's what our focus has been. I think a mistake would be, and obviously there is some political discussion of this at the moment, but a mistake would be to say the UK should have worse software and technology because we only want to buy things which are built here on British shores. What I want to be the case is that British technology companies can compete and outcompete a lot of those US, or it's not just about US companies, it's about international companies. And so Brits get access to the best technology and they happen to be British. That's the approach we're taking at Sovereign AI. Often we will, make sure, and obviously our focus is on British sovereign companies, but often I think we do overly focus on large companies rather than smaller ones when it comes to assessing whether or not a company can deliver for government. It isn't the case because you're a small number of people that you can't build competitive products. I invest in startups. The whole point of doing that is to say small, determined teams can build better products. So there can be a shift in procurement where we say we're more open-minded about smaller companies. And I think that would help British companies compete because a lot of them can't operate yet at the scale that American competitors do. But I'm certainly not against working internationally with the best companies. I just want to make sure more of them are British.
There's been a lot of criticism of Palantir in particular, hoovering out contracts with the NHS and the Ministry of Defence and other government departments as well. Is there really no British AI company that can do what Palantir does?
Well, if you look at the recent history of NHS software contracting and the absolute debacle that we lived through in the 2000s on this, unfortunately, a US company did have to come in and provide a much better service. So whether it's specifically within the healthcare system in the NHS or education system or other areas of government, I think there should be global competition to serve the British people. I'm one of the best companies in the world to do that. Very clearly, Palantir has some products which are the best in the world at what they do. And the way to change that is to invest in British companies here and work very closely with them to build better software. It would be incredibly short-sighted to say Brits shouldn't have access to the best software because we don't like some of the shareholders on the cap table of these companies. And even more short-sighted to then say, right, we're going to ban foreign technology from Britain because the knock-on effects would be horrendous, both for Brits who use these services, but also I think for our AI companies here, because almost certainly they will get banned elsewhere. So the right approach to Palantir being very good is to build companies in Britain which are better.
Okay. To that end, how do promising British AI companies get you on their cap table?
Well, at Sovereign AI, we are very public about our criteria. They're all on our website, about how to apply, also on our website. And we've got a great investment team they can reach out to directly. So sovereignai.gov.uk is the place to go. And we are inundated at the moment with applications. It has landed really well so far with the entrepreneurial community. We now have a big job on our hands to continue to deliver.
One of the unusual things at your launch was that you announced that you were going to pay the legal fees of startups who wanted to reincorporate in the UK. Has that received much interest yet?
Yeah. So look, I think we offered a lot of stuff. We're going to work on a lot of stuff, and I think whether it's capital, compute, data, these are big levers. The legal fees to flip a company, I think, are relatively small in the grand scale of things, but we want to do that too. The reason why we said that is because we want to make it clear that UK is a great place to be set up as a legal topco. And I went through in my private work at Balderton. I was on the board of 5 companies that went through an exit of some kind last year, whether it was M&A, it was a public listing, it was P, and trust me, and that was in an American topco, a Danish topco, a German topco. The British one was the easiest. So there's lots of good reasons to be based in Britain. Lots of companies, especially if they do Y Combinator or Entrepreneur First US, I might add, are encouraged to set up a Delaware topco day one, even if they're coming back to Britain to build in Britain. We think that's a mistake, so we're trying our best to convince.
Yes, I read in your newsletter that you think that's a mistake, and that was the example of GoCardless.
Yes, exactly.
Said, so why isn't it a mistake? Why should they register here?
Well, I think if you're going to build a company predominantly in Britain and most of your employee base are here, then you want to be under the same legal setup. The UK legal setup around things like EMI and share schemes is one of the best in the world. It's very generous. We could make it more generous, and I hope the government do that. If you are contracting with other British companies, it saves you a hell of a lot of legal work if you're also a British company. So for lots of reasons, the regulatory alignment is important, makes things a lot smoother, makes things a lot cheaper. Obviously, if you're going to be an international company and you're going to have offices everywhere and you're going to have a lot of people in the US, you should be a US topco. But if you're going to do it from Britain, you should be a British topco.
And part of your remit is that you have to invest in companies that are anchored in Britain, which is a slightly flexible term, isn't it? I think the Telegraph was reporting that one of the companies that you're looking to back, Odyssey ML, is actually based in the US. How do you...
Yeah, and there was a correction made to that article. Odyssey is a team which is founded by the CTO of Wave, a legendary British company. He's based in London. He's building an engineering team here in London. Most of the employees are here in the UK. But his CEO, who happens to be British, has opened a US office, and I think they are legally registered in the US as well. To apply, but we're not giving them money, to be clear. We're not investing any tax, but we're not investing a penny of taxpayers' money into the company. We are supporting them with some free compute here in the UK to encourage them to build more models here in the UK and not on American cloud. The broader point here is 90%, maybe more, a vast majority of what we do will be into British topcos and British teams. There will be instances where founders, for reasons I've already mentioned, they went to Y Combinator or they want to open a US office very early, decide to go with a US legal topco. I think it'd be very short-sighted and, insular and nationalistic in a way Britain isn't, to say we must only invest in companies with a UK topco. And by the way, we hope they've got the, received pronunciation, and you hope they have the British flag on the front door, right? We are very proud about Britain's place in the global economy. And so for those people talking about things where you say, well, you must only invest in British people and British companies here. I think really what they're saying is we don't want you to invest at all. I think that's really the nuance here, because it would be so short-sighted to say we care exclusively about the legal setup of a company that I don't think people make that argument in good faith.
Mm-hmm. One of the other remits that you have is you have to invest in companies that comply with the law.
Yes,
sounds like a very sensible thing
Indeed.
to do. There's been some debate about copyright law in this country, and I think last month Baroness Kidron wrote in the Times that she wanted assurances that the Sovereign AI unit would comply with the AI copyright laws in Britain. Can you assure her?
Yes, indeed. And we have since day one, made it clear if you apply for funding or if you apply for any kind of compute support in the UK, as it says on our website, obviously you have to comply with UK law. The mind boggles as to why that would have to be said publicly. We couldn't invest in something that didn't comply with UK law, but we have said it explicitly on our website. We've said it explicitly that this also means copyright law, obviously, and we said it explicitly online. I completely recognise why people care about this issue, right? And I think navigating, the technological growth of AI with proper compensation and proper legal support for cases where copyright's been infringed is really important. That's been the case in lots of different technologies, especially when it comes to copyright law. As it happens, most of the investments we're making are in companies that have nothing to do with human-trained data. So things like chips, chip architecture, even Ineffable Intelligence doesn't use human data. It's on the front of the can. So I don't think it will affect us often, but I can provide, once again, assurances, as I have done many times online, as we do as a team, that we will comply with UK copyright law.
And you're looking to hire some new investment partners, I believe.
Yes.
What kind of people are you looking for?
Yeah, so we've got a public call for 2 new partners, and we want people with different types of backgrounds. We do want people with venture experience. I think that's really important. What's unique about our fund is that we're bringing people with venture experience into government, but we'd also like someone with more operational experience of building a frontier AI company. And you can see more about that if you go to sovereignai.gov.uk.
You wrote a very bullish op-ed in the Times recently, asking the rhetorical question, do we dare to be the home of global ambition once again? So to turn this from a rhetorical to a real question, do we?
Well, I think if you ask most people in the streets, are they proud of Britain's historical contributions, scientifically and commercially? I think most people would say yes. And I think most people would say we'd like to continue to be thought of as world leaders, as inventors, as scientists, and as entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, I think if you look at where Britain was 30 years ago, we were at a great starting place once again when it came to the software industry. I don't think we as a country benefited enough from that. 20 years ago, we were in a great place when it came to the internet. Sir Tim Berners-Lee himself contributed heavily to the invention of it. And I don't think we benefited as a nation enough from that. And so I think most people would agree with me that we must benefit more from AI. However, that does require some difficult discussions and trade-offs. And obviously, what is a live debate, and I think unlike some of the discussions that we get around copyright law and US topcos of a tiny minority of our investments, which are mostly, I think, bad faith arguments, there are some really important debates to be had about energy provision, around jobs, and around regulation of AI. To get this right in a British way, we have to have those debates. And I think overall we'll come out very optimistic and ambitious about what UK can achieve. And hopefully people recognise the transformative impact it can have on their lives, on the British economy, and of course on our national security.
You also mentioned in that article about how AI has a bit of an image problem at the moment. There's a lot of public skepticism. And you also point out that the AI industry itself doesn't really help this because there are kind of a lot of the doomers within the companies talking about how 50% of all entry-level white-collar jobs are going to get eliminated in the next 5 years, or some of the AI pioneers are writing books like, if anyone builds this, everyone is going to die. So it's not surprising in a way that the public has a bit of an allergic reaction to the AI industry at the moment. What can be done about that?
Yeah, and look, it boggles the mind sometimes when you listen to world-leading experts in machine learning, and then listen to their views on how the economy works, and you realise that they're probably still at GCSE level. So that is the nature of a lot of brilliant minds. They're experts in the field. They're brilliant, and some of the people building these labs are astonishingly intelligent, erudite people. But their understanding of economics is weak. There is no worry in my mind that we're going to see anything but an increase in demand from AI that will be represented in jobs, as it has been in every single technological wave beforehand. But there will be disruption, and that is inevitable with technological change. The only question we should be asking ourselves, certainly in Britain, is through that disruption, how do we seize on the opportunities and make sure Britain benefits from them, because the disruption will happen. AI is going to advance with or without British support. We can't be ostriches with our head in the sand about this. So we have to identify the opportunities and seize on those opportunities to strengthen our economy. And the opportunity is there. It's incredibly exciting that we are probably the envy of almost every country in the world, bar maybe the US and China, when it comes to our position in this AI transformation. And so I personally making the case, and I hope more people do, that we should be incredibly positive about it. And perhaps we could have a little bit more sanity when it comes to some of the philosophical ruminations of the leaders in this space.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're almost out of time. So I'm going to fire some quick-fire questions at you.
Oh, wonderful.
Which investors do you most respect that you would most like to join the Sovereign AI unit?
In my dream investor lineup, my fantasy team, I have followed the career of Michael Moritz closely. He's probably the venture capitalist that I admire the most. You know, he comes from a rich background as a journalist, as I'm sure you know, early backer of people like, you know, Steve Jobs and almost every storied technology breakout in the Valley. And I think if you read some of his recent writings, he's an incredibly reflective and erudite guy. The reason why I mentioned Mike Moritz is because he was doing venture at a time when it was not popular to be an entrepreneur, let alone an investor in technology. We want those people to come to the Sovereign AI Fund who think differently, as the Apple ad used to say, and are willing to be contrarians. So if you look up to Mike Moritz's career and you think, wow, I'd like to replicate some of that, we'd love you to come join the Sovereign AI team for a bit.
And he grew up in Cardiff.
Indeed, yeah, where we will be celebrating the launch of Sovereign AI in a couple of weeks.
So is this a possibility that Mike might join you?
Mike himself, I don't know about Mike himself, but you know, there's some brilliant people in the venture industry globally who've reached out to us and said, look, we'd love to help in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure about Sir Michael Moritz, but we'll see.
What's an underappreciated skill to look for when hiring?
Passion. I think a lot of people come into job interviews, and this is true at Balderton as well as in the Sovereign AI world, with a technical background of, you know, this is my CV, these are my skills, these are the things I've done. And actually, the stuff I look for more than any of that is, do you love this? Like, is this the thing that you lay in bed awake at night thinking about? Are you going to that additional event? Are you reading that blog post? Are you doing this, you know, in your head, in your spare time on the tube? That passion, I think, is going to be you know, really important, especially as a lot of the technical rote work we do, AI supports us with. I think that passion will really determine how successful anyone is in their career and life, probably. And that's what we look for at Sovereign AI and at Balderton.
Final question. What's your biggest investment miss?
At Balderton, you know, I've fortunate to have met about every European entrepreneur. So there's a plenty a long list of things. You know, I will talk about one because I hope we've corrected more recently. I looked at Aura Ring really early in the development of that company and took the very boring cliche VC view that, we shouldn't do hardware. Hardware is really difficult, supply chains, and And obviously Aura Ring turned out to be a huge success. I'm not wearing mine right now, but I'm a big fan of it. Subsequently, we have invested in Sava, which is a British-based company taking a different approach to CGMs, but with elements of Aura in it. So hopefully we've corrected for that.
I think Bessemer Venture Partners have their own anti-portfolio of great investments they missed. Does Balderton have the same?
Yeah, we debate it on a regular basis. Venture capital is very painful because if you get a decision, if you make an investment decision, you get it wrong, you lose one extra money. If you don't make the decision and it goes well, you can lose out on hundreds of times your money. So trust me, many great companies haunt us, but hopefully it you know, trains our mind. And we do have a saying at Balderton, you know, that misses are the price you pay for great deal flow. So, you know, all because we made some misses, the good news is we've probably got it right more often.
It's the nature of the game, isn't it?
Indeed.
James, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining the show. We'll drop a link to the Sovereign AI's newsletter where you can hear quarterly updates from James, along with the Sifted Daily in the episode description. As always, please rate, review, and share the podcast. And this episode was produced by Maya Dalrymple Hornby.